Bonjour à tous et merci d'être venus malgré les vacances. C'est un plaisir aujourd'hui d'accueillir Christophe Leponcin-Lafitte qui est au laboratoire Système de référence temps-espace, plus connu sous le nom de CIRT de l'Observatoire de Paris. Christophe est spécialiste d'astrométrie de précision et de mécanique céleste relativiste. Et il a effectué sa thèse au CIRT sous la direction de Pierre Tessandier de 2003 à 2006, sur les sujets de la propagation de la lumière en espace-temps courbe, avant de partir 2 ans en postdoc à Dresde pour travailler sur les effets relativistes de la rotation de la Terre et aussi sur la modélisation des observables de Gaïa. Puis, après 1 an d'ATER, il a eu un poste d'astronome adjoint au CIRT et donc il travaille actuellement sur ses sujets favoris. Il est d'ailleurs co-directeur adjoint du CIRT. Il est également membre du groupe de physique fondamentale du CNES et directeur du master des sciences de l'univers et de technologie spatiale. Et donc ces sujets sont toujours la propagation de la lumière en espace-temps courbe, mais aussi les tests de la gravitation, la télémétrie laser Terre-Lune. Également, comme je le disais, un de ces sujets est la mécanique céleste relativiste, pour les éphémérides, en particulier le but de tester la gravitation avec les éphémérides des satellites naturels. Aujourd'hui, il va nous parler donc du système solaire et de la relativité générale avec les tests en cours et les promesses de Gaïa. Now I switch to English and I let Christophe start his talk. Thanks, Christophe.
Thank you very much for this introduction and invitation. So during this talk, I will try to give you an overview of what's going on inside the solar system and the main object to test gravitation with solar system data. So I will do a talk in 2 parts. The first part will be dedicated to an overview of what is the current status of testing gravity inside the solar system, and then I will give you some promise and advertisement of what we can expect from Gaia. So, first of all, what are our current motivation to test gravitation? Of course, as you know, gravitation is a classical theory. We have no interaction with the quantum theory, and in the best case, we need an unification of all fundamental interaction, which means unify the standard model of particles and gravitation. We have also some highlight coming from cosmology that people at ERP are knowing very well. In particular, observation from Planck satellite or galactic observation, where we need to introduce some kind of dark matter and dark energy to be able to understand the observation. So, which means finally that maybe we need a modification of our gravitational law, which means a modification of general relativity. In particular, people are working a lot when you are considering the dark energy problem, that you can interpret this as a modification of general relativity and by an extension to other kind of theory. So, solar system is a laboratory to test gravity for a long time, since Galilei. So it's a long story. So first of all, I have to introduce the basics that we are doing. So the first basic is equivalence principle, 3 facets, the University of Freefall, local position invariance and Lorentz invariance. It is quite well tested up to now. We have lunar laser ranging. We have also ground experiment in Washington. We have Edvöch experiment. We have also gravitational redshift experiment on ground and space, as I will describe a little bit after. And we have some space mission, because the neighborhood of the Earth is a very good laboratory, because we are in a low gravity condition to test free fall experiments, so experiment like microscope. If the equivalence principle is correct, we can interpret gravitation as a space-time curvature, so an object described by a metric tensor following the equation of general relativity. And the free falling masses follow geodesics. And ideal clocks are measuring a proper time. So free fall experiment. So as I told you, this is a very old story. This is a slide that I found in a presentation from Cliff. So this is something that we are testing from a long time. Here you have more or less recent, which means what we have done this last century of experiments. So from the initial experiment of Edvöch with torsion balance to LLR and modern tests that you have here, Edvöch, donc in Washington, the torsion balance experiment. The future of this kind of test is in the following weeks, I hope so, because you know that microscope missions have been launched recently, and we are waiting for the first paper of the mission. So microscope is a small satellite, French satellite, where you have the comparison, in fact, of two cylinders, coaxial cylinder with different kind of masses, where you are measuring exactly the difference between these the distance between these two masses in titanium, for example, and on other materials. If free fall is correct, in principle, you have no deviation. The two cylinders will stay coaxial. If you have a breaking of this, of course, they will move from each other, and the electrostatic forces that is implied on the two cylinders will change a little bit. So it will be a proof of the breaking. So maybe in a few weeks you will see a paper in Physical Regulators about a constraint, first constraint of the mission. We are at the half of the mission, at the level of 10 to minus 15, which is 2 orders of magnitudes better that we can do with LLR, with lunar laser ranging. So by monitoring the orbit of the moon around the Earth and Edvöch experiment. Local position invariance. This is also a very long story. This is a prediction, a direct prediction at the beginning of the theory when Einstein wrote down the equation. It has been, in fact, measured for the first time in the 60s by Pombe and Repka. And then, so here you have the Pombe and Repka at 10% test of the local position invariance. Alors, yes, of course. It means that if you do an experiment at one position, to say the thing very simply, you have to find exactly the same result if you are doing the same experiment in another position, more or less. So you have to obtain the same thing. If you are looking for, in Pumba-Röpke experiment, it was to deal with a microwave radiation and to look at the frequency from at the ground of it was in Harvard, if I remember well, Harvard, yes. And 10 meters higher, you look at the same frequency and see the difference. So this is what we call the gravitational redshift. So it means that the clock is more or less running at different time with respect to the gravitational field. To say the thing very quickly and easily. So we are improving this kind of experiment with VESO, the experiment of VESO in the IIT, which was a rocket with an hydrogen maser inside, with a microwave link between the rocket and the ground, and of course at the ground another masers, and a comparison of the two clocks during the flight of the rocket. So it gives a better constraint on the gravitational redshift. And in the future, maybe in 2 years, we hope so, a space mission which is called ICES, for atomic clock ensemble in space, which is an ensemble of 2 clocks, one hydrogen maser and one atomic clock, cesium atomic clock, which will be put on the International Space Station, so in this box here, located at the Columbus module, and compare with clocks on ground in metrology lab, like in CERT, but also in PTB in Germany, in GPL in the US, and so on. And we expect an improvement of the gravitational redshift constraint by a factor of 80 with respect to what GPA obtained 30 years ago. The second basic principle of GR is the field equation. The field equation means that it gives by this formula, so here R is the Ricci tensor, and T mu is energy momentum tensor. So a link, a mathematical link between curvature, space-time curvature, and matter energy content of the universe, which leads to this kind of representation where a mass is, so energy is curving space-time around. It has different aspects and leads to different important effects for space mission. For example, the law of dynamics of a probe or planet is different a little bit with respect to Newton's law of gravity. Even if solar system is a weak field, it's not a strong field, it's not a binary pulsar system, it's not a neutron star, a double neutron star system, so this is a weak field, so we can linearize this kind of equation around a Minkowski, so a flat space-time. But anyway, we can detect on the motion of the planet, of the motion of the natural satellite, on the motion of the probe inside the solar system, we can detect this relativistic effect, and we can constrain, for example, the advance of the perihelion of planets like Mercury and Mars. We can constrain the relativistic equation of motion. Proper time also. So proper time is something which is in principle measured by an ideal clock. Of course, an ideal clock does not exist, even if in laboratory, in metrology laboratory, we are doing a real clock. So with it's different, so you have to correct, which is different so from a coordinate time. And when you are looking for a probe somewhere on Cassini, for example, on Saturn, like Cassini, for example, you have in the link between the satellite and the Earth, you have a delay due to the curvature around Saturn, which is the delay in time delay in propagation, which is called Shapiro delay. And of course, if you are considering astrometry, as for VLBI, very long base interferometry, or for Hipparcos satellite and now Gaia satellite, you have some effect of light deflection due to the presence of massive body inside the solar system, which perturbs the light ray arriving to the satellite. To give you an idea of what we are speaking about precision and the evolution of the precision of our apparatus. So, if we are considering ground and space geodesy, more or less for lunar laser ranging, so to track the moon around the Earth, or even for satellite laser ranging, so we have geodetic satellites, the piece of a sphere with a lot of retroreflectors, and we are shooting, they are in low orbit around the Earth, and we are shooting with lasers to construct the orbit of this satellite, and with this orbit we are able to construct a gravity field of the Earth. Even for GPS and Galileo satellite, we are going from centimeter level of accuracy in the positioning to the millimeter level. And even for some mission, we are sub-millimeter level now. 1 order of magnitude, basically. For the redshift, 1 order of magnitude also. For ground and space astrometry, remember, 20 years ago, Hipparcos, we got a catalog of 100,000 stars with an accuracy of a few milliarc seconds on position, parallax, proper motion of the object. With Gaia, we will go to the microarc second level, so 3 order of magnitude better. And for ground observation with optical interferometry, so gravity as VLT, we are also at the level of 10 microarc second. Navigation of probes. Since the time of Viking and Shapiro experiment, which was more or less 100 meters of precision on the ranging of Viking, Cassini experiment by using Ka bands, so you have 3 bands in radio science experiment, S band, X band, Ka band, at 2 gigahertz, 9 gigahertz, and 45 gigahertz. So this is a big, here you have a sketch of Cassini. So the big antenna, you have a big antenna because you are using Ka band. So why we are increasing the frequency? Just to go deeper in the solar system. So if you have X band, the signal would be very noisy at the location of Saturn. With Ka band, it's better. This is exactly the same story on Moore experiment, which is exactly the same thing that on Cassini, but Bepi-Colombo is aimed to go around Mercury. And Juno experiment, we are waiting some news from Juno, from JPL, was a mission to do the gravity field of Jupiter. And JUICE, the European mission, in 10 years, to the discovery of what's going on the Jovian system. So more or less we have a factor of 10 on radio science. So all these things lead to some complication for people doing theoretical modeling of observables. You need to describe the light propagation more carefully and not only to consider Shapiro effect, but also to go deeper in details when you are considering equation of motion. And the conclusion this last decade is to go to the second post-Newtonian order of approximation to describe correctly light propagation and time-to-time dynamics. And all our reference system theory in solar system is described at the first post-Newtonian level, which means the first order of correction after a flat space-time. So, better sensibility, more and more data, because linear laser ranging has been used since the 60s, VLBI since the 80s, and they are still running up. So you have more and more data, you have better sensibility, so you can go a little bit deeper inside the constraint that you can obtain from solar system. So, TestGR, two kinds of experiments. Let us say experiment based on light propagation and dynamics. So you have two frameworks used to know, which is parameterized post-Newtonian formalism, which has been constructed by Cliff Wild and Ken Nordvert in the 70s. So more or less you have the line elements of your space-time metric like this, with 10 parameters, but 2 are very important. Gamma here in the special part of the metric. Phi n is the Newtonian-like potential, and beta here describing the nonlinearity of the field. So more or less gamma is related to light experiment and beta to the perihelion precession, to say the thing easily. The second formalism used by people around the world is the fifth-fourth formalism, where you have a modification of your potential with a Yukawa potential, so a modification here with this kind of thing. The current constraints. First, Cassini experiments during a conjunction between Cassini, the Sun, and the Earth. So during the navigation of the probe, they try by a radio link to determine the curvature of the light ray in the frequency domain, and they obtain more or less a constraint at the level of 10 to minus 5 for gamma. Another approach was to use the VLBI, all the VLBI database, less sensitive. For beta, planetary ephemerid and the orbit of the moon have been used, so you are tracking all the perihelion precession of the planet. So mainly Mercury and Mars are giving this number at the level of 10 to minus 5. And if you are considering the Nordvert effect, which is how the Earth and the Moon are falling in the gravitational field of the Sun, you can obtain a constraint at the level of 10 to minus 4. For the fifth-fourth formalism, you have a lot of different experiments from the laboratory to solar system scale. So when you have a potential like that, a modification like that, you have two parameters, a wavelength. So here you have a wavelength at the level of the centimeters, and here at the level of the IU, the astronomical unit, and you have the strength of the modification, which is represented here. All the parts in color are exclusion parts. So experiment like ranging to Mars or LLR exclude all these parts, and in laboratory, this part. All the other are free and have to be constrained one day. Why? Because here, in fact, this is I can switch off the c square, but in the equation here, you have a c square. Just a question of scale, nothing else. So, voilà. What is going on now? You have some kind of funny experiment ongoing. Maybe you were aware that 2 years ago, 2 Galileo satellites were launched and on the wrong orbit. which was a good publicity to the European Space Agency. But anyway, when you are physicist, you can have sometimes a good idea. And by using, in fact, the eccentric orbit, the GPS or Galileo satellite is not supposed to be on eccentric orbit, you can look at what is the result of the redshift if I compare the clock inside these two satellites and the ground. And because they are eccentric orbit, you have some periodic variation in the gravitational redshift. So you can try to do exactly the same experiment that GPA 30 years ago. And this is what Pacôme Delva proposed some years ago, just after the launch. And we can hope, at least, to reproduce in other configurations the result of GPA and maybe to improve a little bit the experiment. Preliminary result will be announced in 4 commencements. I can say something else. But the same kind of experiment is also possible on other satellites like IGRASP, which is a geodetic satellite which will be launched in 2 years. Another aspect of what is going on with relativity is geodesy. We have very good clocks now everywhere in the world, in particular in optical frequency. So here you can see the clock accuracy and the years, and you see that microwave clock, which were the standard basis up to now, are improving always, but new optical frequency comb. So I'm not a clock expert. I can explain you in details what is an optical clock. But you see, what you can see in this sketch is that the accuracy is improving very fast. At the level of 10 to minus 18, and even better. So you can imagine to use 2 clocks at different locations to constrain the difference in the gravitational field between the 2 locations. So it gives you directly a geodetic measurement, the gravity field, directly, locally. But you can also say, okay, well, I have a good clock. So if I have a fiber link between two locations and two optical clock at starting and ending point, I can compare this clock. And this is more or less what Pacôme Delva done recently with a comparison of optical clocks linked with a fiber link and leading to a test of special relativity. But the good question finally is to say, okay, we're improving our test because we have better apparatus, we have more and more data, we have even new observables if we are considering relativistic geodesy, but is it enough? We are testing PPN formalism in details, we are testing fifth force in detail, but we have a lot of theory. Here you have I've done a choice of 4 different approaches. Personal choice, because maybe you have several theory by people doing theory. So here you have the post-Einstein gravity developed by Jekyll and Raynaud 10 years ago. Monde, because we know that finally it can be used to explain galactic rotation curves, okay? But when you are looking inside the solar system, it's more or less rolls out. You have Fab4 if you are dealing a little bit with cosmological problem, and you have Isimi, for example, or Einstein-Heffer theory, which is more or less the same thing. So a Lorentz symmetry breaking. And all these things are not finally covered, or very partially covered, by the PPN formalism or the fifth force formalism. For example, the Isimi formalism, phenomenology, it's linked to the PPN formalism by only one parameter, but inside, in the gravitational sector, but you have 10 parameters in the SEMI formalism. So we have a lack, finally, of constraint from this theory, or I prefer to say from this phenomenology, and we can consider to look to this phenomenology. So I will do a choice to focus only on Lorentz symmetry, so on SEMI. What is SEMI? This is more or less a general framework to study the Lorentz invariance. This is called the standard model extension. It has been developed by Alan Kostolikin, collaborator, 20 years ago. So more or less, the Lagrangian of the theory is very easy. This is the Lagrangian of the standard model of particles, of general relativity, and something which describes all possible Lorentz symmetry breaking in the gravitational sector by looking at free fall experiment and gravitational experiment, but also in the matter systems, looking at what's happened if I'm doing atom interferometry with cesium or something else. In the electromagnetic sector also, and so on and so on. So if I look only at the gravity sectors of the theory, I have a modification of the Lagrangian with a symmetric Kras-Fiery transfer of 9 parameter Lorentz violating coefficient, and the 10th parameter is only the traceless condition. So in fact, you have 9 conditions, plus some non-minimal higher order terms, which are not considered here, and where people doing theoretical development are studying now. So if I consider only this modification of Einstein-Hilbert action, I arrive to modification of the equation of motion of a particle, where you have the Newtonian coefficient, potential, plus some extra terms given to you, Lorentz violating term. So basically, you have 9 parameters. If you are looking for here for the Sun and the Earth, orbiting around the Sun, if I consider the International Celestial Reference Frame, which is the frame that every astronomer is using to analyzing observation, I consider a violation, a Lorentz violation along the x-axis, or the y-axis, or the z-axis. I can also consider a violation in time, so nothing moves. But if I do the experiment, the result will change in time. So this is the STT parameter, time. But I can also look at an experiment in one direction, do the same experiment at different time, and look if I have Lorentz breaking along this direction. So I will get a parameter SXT, X, S, X, Y, and so on, and so on, and so on. So along the X and Y direction, or X and Z direction, and so on, and so on. So it gives you the direction of the Lorentz symmetry breaking possible, and in time. So what is done for the moment in solar system with this? More or less only post-fit analysis. What I mean by post-fit analysis, I mean that if I consider the residuals of binary pulsars, so what we are observing from binary pulsars with a radio telescope on Earth, or if I'm looking on the orbit of the Moon, I have a framework, which is general relativity, and I confront my observation. Here, this is a case of lunar laser ranging residuals. So when I have my dynamical modeling, when I have analyzed my observation, in GR, I have some kind of residual. So around 0, no signal. And then I can use the precedent equation and try to find inside some signals. Of course, if I'm doing that, people are using least square in general to do that. So assuming white noise, so in my residuals, I have only red noise. So I can find nothing. And the only thing that I can do is to overestimate my parameter, and I cannot deal with correlation. Oops. And this is the example with LLR. So people 10 years ago tried to fit inside the residuals this kind of signals arriving from a Lorentz and various breaking. But the problem was, first, they analyze on a time span of observation which was not compatible with that kind of equation. And second, if I look, for example, at the lunar potential, the second degree of the lunar potential, I have exactly the same equation, more or less. So which means that the this parameter and this one and this one are fully correlated. So I can say nothing, more or less. But if I'm looking inside the residuals, I have already defined this, fix. And then I try to give some value of that. Okay. So more or less, it was not possible to deal with correlation with other parameters and overestimate their parameters. So people instead doing some modelization from scratch. So from scratch, we are going to the full equation of motion in Isimi formalism with standard Newtonian approach, everything. We modified also the software of analyzing the observation, and we try to fit the LLR data to this model. So I have to go a little bit more faster. So we obtain a new ephemeris. So you can see here the result with a comparison with GPL standard ephemeris in GR. So more or less, here is most interesting things. It tells you the dispersion of the Earth-Moon distance between the two ephemeris, and we are at the level of 5 centimeters. So which means that we are able to analyze correctly the LLR data. If we are doing now the direct analysis, we obtain some linear combination. So the traceless condition here, and here some combination. Why? Because you have a geometry. The moon has an orbit, clearly defined. The Earth has an orbit, clearly defined. And this is always in the same plane, more or less. There's no huge change. So you are just able to give a linear combination of Isimi parameter. We are using also the data, so to try to give the right constraint and not an estimation. And what we obtain is to something where if you consider different reflectors on the moon, if you are considering different stations shooting to the moon, your determination is different, which means that you have a lot of systematics which are not taken into account in previous study. So you have, in fact, to put the factors, the limiting factors, to have a realistic constraint. So you have a method to do that, which is a jackknife method. And by doing this, we obtain real constraint. So on more or less every parameter, we were better than previous one, which is surprising. Surprising because we were able to to improve by a factor of 30 previous results, and by a factor of 5 post-fit analysis on only one parameter. Same thing on the LBI. We modify the Goddard software at NASA to introduce this gravitational delay, which is the difference between two radio telescopes when they receive the signal from a quasar. What you are monitoring is the difference in arrival between the first and the second station, and it gives you the orientation of the Earth. But also, if you have the sun is curving the light ray, so you have also a Shapiro effect in the two light ray, and you find it here in the delay. If you look at that term, this is the standard Shapiro term in the LBI. So that's I say a few slides before, STT and gamma are related directly. But you have another correction due to Lorentz symmetry breaking in ECME. And we were able, by using all the geodetic LBI data for all sources during 35 years, to constrain that parameter for the first time at the level of 10 to minus 5 last year. And in order to compare with a post-fit analysis, we do also a post-fit analysis, and you obtain 10 to minus 8, which were not the value that we presented, illustrating that in post-fit analysis you are overestimating clearly your parameter. This value is already updated by a neutron star merger recently, which give an overview of what gravitational waves can tell us to gravity test, because we were destroyed by 10 orders of magnitudes of a merger. In the paper, they presented a STT constraint at the level of 10 to minus 15. Just to look at what we can expect from a gravitational wave. So now, Gaia, because this is my advertisement, final advertisement. Gaia is maybe, so you have here a full sky of Gaia, the first observation, a reconstruction of the sky, with a major step of 3 orders of magnitudes in the accuracy of parallaxes and position of 1 billion of stars, we can expect to study in details what is going on with light deflection inside solar system. So first, a recap of the first DR1 publication. So this is the first release last year. So here you have a comparison in blue between all the observations done in the catalog. Here you have Hipparcos. So here this is the number of objects observed. Here's the distribution in magnitudes. So you can see that we have a lot of objects observed and published in the catalog. So 1.1 billion sources, 2 million of sources published with parallax and proper motion. Parallax and proper motion because we use previous as a prior Hipparcos catalog to construct the parallax. You have some uncertainty in position at the level of 2.3 milliarc seconds, 0.3 milliarc seconds with parallax. But this is the first release, once again. For the future release next year, more or less all systematic error will be below 100 microarc seconds. Typical precision that we can announce is for a magnitude equal to 1530 microarc seconds. But the major improvement with respect to the first release is that this one will be only a Gaia-only solution, which means no prior from Hipparcos. Of course, more data and better data, of course, input. In 1 hour, more or less, I think that we have 1 million of observation of the satellite. So during my talk, 1 million more. The calibration, of course, are improving because we have more time of observation and so on. And you have solar system objects. So here you have three plots given us in magnitudes. Here this is a percentage, more or less all asteroids observed will be in that field. Here you have here the distribution in a semi-major axis, so the near Earth orbiter, mean belt, and so on. And here you have the number of transits of asteroid on the CCD. So basically 1,000 for the best case. So we can, it's still to be defined clearly by people inside the consortium, but at least 10,000 asteroids orbit will be published. Concerning relativity and what we can do. First, Gaia is orbiting around L2, so L2 of the Sun Earth at 1 million kilometers. We have first to consider the Einstein-Hoffman equation of motion inside the barycentric celestial reference frame to describe the motion of the satellite. If we don't take into account the relativistic effects inside the dynamical equation of motion, you can lose several kilometers in your tracking in less than 1 year. We need to be able to produce and to assume that we have 1 microarc second of accuracy on the observation. We need an accuracy of 1 millimeter per second on the motion of the satellite. So we're not taking into account this kind of effects which lead to a disaster. Light deflection. How much inside the solar systems? So of course you know the number for spherical sun, 1.7 arc second for rising light ray, so rising the sun. But if we are looking to Jupiter, for example, you have 10,000 of microarc second of light deflection, and here this column is the most interesting. For example, you have at 90 degrees from the field that you are observing. So you have Jupiter here, you are observing here, you have still an effect of 1 microarc second due to Jupiter. So here you have a small film. This is the field of view of Gaia. Here, in time, in 3 years. And in blue, you have 1 microarc second of deflection. In red, more than 10,000. And this is a planet coming inside the field of view of the satellite. And you have to modelize this and to throw it away to be able to describe the position of the stars. So the modeling, very quickly, we have different approach to deal with the light deflection. More or less, mass monopole approximation in uniform motion for the planet inside solar system to calculate the deflection due to the planet. A quadrupole, which means a flattening of the planet, in particular Jupiter, because if you have a light ray grazing Jupiter, the flattening of Jupiter is producing light deflection of 200 microarc second. So you have to take this into account and to construct the full modeling to go to the position of the star. Time scale, this is also the same story. We have to we have a rubidium clock inside the satellite. We have to be able to compare this clock to the ground. Why? Because more or less 1 microsecond of error is 1 microarc second of errors in parallax. So you need a planetary ephemerid fully compatible with general relativity. So I will go very quickly on that. A clock synchronization. So here you have an illustration of the signals of 1.5 microseconds that have to be calculated all along the orbit of the satellite. Up. So this is not interesting, this not. And I go here, which is the most interesting. This is a test, what we can do. So you have two kinds of tests, global test, local test. What we call by global test, the determination of gamma parameter from light deflection, for example. A local test, the same thing, a gamma parameter, but around Jupiter. So two-way, light and dynamics of solar system object. For the light, this already we can expect from 1 million star determination of a gamma parameter inside solar system at the level of 10 to the minus 6, which is 1 order of magnitude better than Cassini. For solar system object, we'll try to test dynamics. So to look at the dynamic of the asteroids, so more or less you have 400,000 SSO observed by Gaia. In the full mission, you have a complete curvature in eccentricity and some imager assist. And we can do some kind of simulation. If I have 5 minutes to finish, yeah, 5 minutes, okay. So the simulation is done, for example, by considering 10,000 asteroids. Let us say 10,000 asteroids. You propagate your orbit in GR. You are using the observation time with a typical Gaia scanning law. So it gives to you the observation that you can expect. You do exactly the same thing, but in an alternative theory, so not GR, plus variation equation, which means your theory, your phenomenology has some parameter, you have to calculate the variational equation, so the differential equation. It gives to you, if you combine your observation and DS, astrometric observation and partial derivative. That's the word I was searching for. Then you can invert these kind of things by a least square or by Monte Carlo method. It doesn't matter. You have some global parameters, which mean flattening of the sun, position of the asteroid, velocity of the asteroid, and also local parameter, which is the value of the parameter of your gravitational theory. And you can look at sensitivity correlation. So quickly with the PPN formalism, standard one. Oops. What you are testing is the perihelion precession of the asteroid. So you have here the formula, classical formula, in PPN formalism, plus flattening of the sun, the effect of the flattening of the sun. With Gaia, you can, in 5 years, or in 10 years of observation, you can reach the level of 10 to the minus 4 in the determination of the beta minus 1 parameter, which has to be compared with planetary ephemerage, which is a little bit better. But your correlation, in that case, is better at the level of 0.4. But if you are combining the Gaia data at 10 years of observation, because we can have an extension to maybe to 10 years, plus radar observation done from 20 years by Jean-Luc Margot at UCLA, you reach easily, very easily, even with 7 asteroids, the level of 10 to the minus 5 obtained by a planetary ephemerate. CEP. You can also try to consider the University of Freefall related for self-gravitation bodies and use these eta parameters, so the Norbert parameters, inside the equation of motion and not beta. You say, okay, all my asteroids are falling in the gravitational field of the sun. In fact, eta is related to the perihelion precession beta. But doing this, you break the correlation mathematically with the flattening of the sun. And here, in that case, you can obtain a determination direct of 10 to minus 6 with 10 years of observation with Gaia. The fifth fourth, oops, exactly the same method. You are using, you propagate the orbit, and here, in red, in full red, you have 5 years of Gaia mission. In dash, 10 years, so you extend the exclusion zone by fifth for formalism. And finally, I will finish on that. With Vecini, you have something very interesting, which is you have a lot of thousands of asteroids. You have a lot of different kind of orbits, inclination, semi-major axis. In solar system, all planets are more or less in the same plane. But asteroid, you have a lot of different orbital configuration. If you are using all these things with Vecini, you can isolate every coefficient alone, just because you have a lot of different orbital configuration. Everything can be decorrelated perfectly. So you have a very nice test. First, improvement of current constraint and direct isolation of each coefficient. So this is the future that we can wait with Gaia. Oops. A lot of data, an amazing accuracy. So a new kind of test in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Okay.